It finally happened. I can fit my Red V Raptor with most of my lenses on a one-handed gimbal. But how does the footage look? All right, here's the deal. I love the size, compactness, and ease of use of the DJI RS2, but one of the reasons I don't use my Red camera as much as I'd like is because it's too big to fit on my RS2 without having to jimmy rig it with counterweights or only be using really small lenses. I was always frustrated that DJI didn't make these arms just a tad bit bigger so that I could fit some larger cameras, because the alternative to an RS2 is the Ronin 2 or a Movi Pro, which are both about 5 times bigger, 5 times heavier, and 5 times more expensive. And for huge decked out setups, that's still your only option. But for simpler, more run and gun cinema camera setups, this new RS3 Pro is now a valid option. And with the release of this RS3 Pro, DJI also launched a smaller RS3 and a brand new transmission system and the ability to use LiDAR focus with any lens. And I'll be giving you my thoughts on all of it in this video. But first, let's focus on the RS3 Pro. This is the official replacement for the RS2 and has about an inch longer of an extension arm, which means you'll be able to fly larger setups. The payload capacity, however, is the exact same as the RS2 at 10 pounds, but it does weigh a little bit more at 3.3 pounds versus the RS2 at just 2.8 pounds. It also comes with a slightly larger OLED touchscreen going from 1 inch on the RS2 to 1.8 inches on the RS3 Pro, and has a redesigned UI that I personally have liked a lot and have had no issues navigating the menu system. And they also added a physical mode switch button on the side to change from pan only, pan and tilt, and pan, tilt, and rotate, so you can more quickly switch between those modes without having to tinker with the touchscreen. And you can now automatically lock all of the arm axes when it shuts off. It gives you the option to either tuck it to one side or face it straight forward. I prefer facing it straight forward, and being able to do this will make it a lot easier to travel with, whereas before it would dangle all over the place, or you'd have to manually lock each of the 3 axes every time you turn the gimbal off. So that is a great new feature as well, and you can also turn the feature off if you want it to just dangle and not auto lock. So this new larger design is made for simple cinema camera setups like the C70, FS6, Blackmagic 6K Pro, Red Komodo, etc. But I wanted to push it to its limits and see if it could handle my 8-pound setup in the Red V Raptor, and it did indeed fit my Red Raptor with a battery on the back as well, and any of my lenses, most being around 1 to 2 pounds, except for my huge 28 to 70 millimeter RF lens, which is over 3 pounds. But after testing out my setup, I felt like the 8 pounds was pushing the motors a little bit too far, making the footage more wobbly. So I put the battery on a D-tap connector and attached it to one of these arms to take a pound off of the motors. And then I made sure to dial in my motor settings to high. And with that, I was able to dial in very smooth movements, even when shooting at 24 frames per second. Now, there still is gonna be some wobbles if you're not doing the ninja walk or if you're running full speed, but that goes for any setup, even the lighter setups. That's just one drawback to these one-handed gimbals, is they don't absorb that fourth axis very well. So you're gonna be able to see some of those up and down jitters if you're not smooth with your walking and movements. Now, besides the increased size, some of the new features of this RS3 Pro over the RS2 is an increased stability and motor stiffness. They claim a fully upgraded stabilization algorithm with adaptive optimization for different scenarios like vehicle mounts, for example. But for these larger setups, I wouldn't expect it to be as smooth as something like a Ronin 2, which is gonna have a lot beefier motors. But the problem with the Ronin 2 is the size, the weight, and the price tag. And for most run and gun shooters, this isn't a practical option. So I think the RS3 Pro is going to fill a nice gap in the market for stabilizing some simpler cinema camera setups for more run and gun shooting. So the question is the RS3 Pro worth upgrading from the RS2? If you're like me and you've been waiting for these larger extension arms which allow you to fit some larger camera setups, then absolutely, this is an awesome upgrade. The other upgrades like larger screen size, the auto locking arms are smaller upgrades and may not be worth it if the RS2 can already fit your setup just fine. Now, for anyone wondering about this specific setup, it's about 15 pounds total, which isn't easy to work with for long periods of time. I wouldn't recommend a setup this heavy without a support system of some kind, but then you're looking like a robot and it's not really a great run and gun low profile setup anymore, so there's just trade-offs. cameras. But for this setup, I have two extension arms that DJI sells separately, so you can have two grips that distribute the weight evenly. Plus, it's great for mounting things like the monitor here and the battery and a microphone if you wanted one on there. And my monitor is mounted with this little small rig double ball adapter. And in order for my monitor to reach my camera, I had to buy a larger 39-inch proprietary RMI red cable. And attached to the base plate here is a rod that holds the focus motors that's then plugged into the RS3 Pro via USB-C, which then allows you to have manual focus at the tip of your fingers. Or you can also hook up this LiDAR focusing system for autofocus capabilities or the transmission system for remote focus pulling, and we'll talk about those items in just a minute. So that's pretty much it for my setup here. Again, it's not light, but much lighter than setups like the Ronin 2. So this is an awesome option for smaller, quicker shooting scenarios. And I've seen a lot of people use something like the Tilt-A-Ring instead of these two handles. And the Tilt-A-Ring is great for being able to mount more things on it. And you have a top handle and a bottom handle, so there's some more versatility there. But after trying the ring setup myself, it's honestly a lot more taxing on my back and arms because I have to hold it out farther away from my body and higher, which makes you fatigue about 3 times faster. And I'm already fatiguing with this setup. Nor do you have easy access to be able to control the focus from the tip of your finger. So there's just pros and cons to these two setups. So personally, I wouldn't use the ring setup very often unless I had an easy rig or something to hold it up for me. But anyway, that's just another option to be aware of, is using a ring. But let's now take a minute to talk about the new LiDAR focus system that works in conjunction with the RS3 and RS3 Pro and just attaches to a hot shoe on top of your camera and plugs into your gimbal. Now, I already mentioned the focus motors that easily attach to a rod that hooks up to the base plate and then plugs into the gimbal. But DJI has now released the same Ronin 4D LiDAR focusing technology that now allows you to have autofocus for any lens and any camera. Now, I already reviewed this LiDAR system in my Ronin 4D review, and this is basically the same technology, and I do think this is going to be an excellent technology. Currently, however, it's just good technology. I do think it works well in static scenarios like this, but if the subject is too far away or there's other subjects in the foreground, it will hunt for the focus and make the shot unusable. So I don't yet find it fully reliable, but then again, I don't find most autofocus systems fully reliable. So you just have to understand the limitations, and if the shot you're doing has foreground objects and your subject is easy to track, then it will be an awesome feature to have in your arsenal. Now, personally, I couldn't get the LiDAR system to work very well. It would work for several minutes and then stop working. I may have set it up wrong, or I might just be using too early a firmware. Landon, with his lens setup on his video, was able to get it to work better. Keep in mind though, because the LiDAR system runs off of your gimbal, it will kill the battery a lot quicker. The RS3 Pro is rated for 12 hours of battery life, same as the RS2. But when using the LiDAR system, I clocked the battery life at more around 3 hours. So it will significantly decrease your battery life. So you're gonna wanna have 2 or 3 Ronin handle batteries on hand to be able to use that LiDAR system. And again, this battery draining could be due to an early firmware issue. DJI has informed me that it is a firmware issue and will be improved with future firmware updates, so that could be the solution. Now, when I'm not using the LiDAR system, I do love having the manual focus ring at the tip of my finger, and this manual focus system is super smooth. But if you don't want to have to operate the camera and pull focus at the same time, DJI has also added to this ecosystem their new pro-grade video transmission system. Now, this is set up by attaching the transmitter on the bottom of your gimbal and into your camera, and in my case, using SDI. And then your image from your camera is transmitted to the transmitter, which then talks to the gimbal, which will give you full control over the gimbal and the focus system using this 7-inch monitor with the same handles that come with the R4D. You could also control the camera if you had the camera hooked up to your Ronin as well. But with this system, you have up to 1080p 60 frames per second viewing, and you can have up to 6-kilometer transmission range, and has anti-interference, sporting 3 frequency bands, allowing for reliable, low latency transmission that can perform well even through walls, and has the ability to be powered directly by the gimbal, or you can give it its own battery as well. And you might want to give it its own battery because I found that when he's feeding off the gimbal battery, again, the gimbal battery dies a lot quicker. But as far as the monitoring and controls go, it has the same high brightness monitor as the Ronin 4D, giving you control of your focus and one gimbal, thus making dual operation for more complex shots like vehicle mounts, jibs, RC cars, and sliders a much more reliable option with the RS3 and RS3 Pro. Overall, I was impressed with the video transmission system. I personally haven't done a lot of shoots using a focus puller or secondary gimbal controllers. I'm mostly a one-man run-and-gun guy. I'm not sure how often I'll have someone pulling my focus, but I think I will more frequently use this as a monitoring system for clients so that everyone isn't huddling around the camera to review the shot. So the new LiDAR system and wireless transmission system are two great new additions to the RS3 and RS3 Pro ecosystem. Keep in mind though, you cannot have focus control through the transmission system at the same time that you're using the LiDAR system. They both plug into the same port on your gimbal, so currently you can only use one at a time. But moving on to our last product that just got released in this ecosystem, and that is the RS3, which is a replacement for the RSC2. I know, confusing naming system. They keep changing it with every product release, but be aware, the RS3 is not a replacement for the RS2. The RS3 is in fact the same form factor as the RSC2. So the RS3 isn't going to be able to fly cameras like the C70 or Blackmagic 6K Pro, but it's made for cameras more like the Canon R5 or the Sony a7S III. Right here you're seeing the R5 with a 50mm RF lens, and that's about as big of a setup as I can fit on mine. A 15-35 RF also fits on there, and I can also put a microphone on top. Much bigger than this, and it's just not gonna balance. So be aware that there are camera setup limitations, but because it's meant for smaller camera setups, it means the whole unit can be more compact and weighs about a ½ pound less than the RS3 Pro. The payload capacity is the same as the RSC2 at 3 kilograms or 6.6 pounds. I found though that you will reach the size limit well before the weight limit. I still think DJI should make these extension arms slightly bigger so they can fit more camera setups. For example, the Blackmagic 6K camera with a lens will come in under 6.6 pounds, but you can't fit it on and get it balanced with how small the arms are. So basically the motors are plenty strong enough to handle anything you can physically balance on it. And like the RS3 Pro, this too has the automated axis locking, as you'll see here. And back on. And it also has the 1.8-inch OLED screen compared to the older 1-inch screen. And it also supports the same improved stabilization algorithm that I mentioned with the RS3 Pro. So really most of the same features as the RS3 Pro, just in a smaller form factor. And the last noticeable change, I wouldn't even call this an upgrade because it's actually smaller now, and that is the battery grip. They made it smaller, which I don't think people will like. I understand they're trying to make it all lighter and more compact, but your battery life now gets reduced from 14 hours on the RSC2 to 12 hours on the RS3, which is still plenty long for most scenarios unless again you're hooking up to that LiDAR system or transmission system. But personally, I don't like the smaller grip. It feels just a tad small for my hand. I can fit 3 fingers comfortably, but that 4th one is kind of jammed up against the side here. And I feel like I have pretty average hand size. But again, for smaller, more petite users, maybe this is a desired new change. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But there you guys have my thoughts on the all-new RS3 Pro, plus LiDAR rangefinder, plus DJI transmission system, plus a smaller option in the RS3. All designed and released together to bring an unprecedented, coordinated shooting experience catered more towards larger crews and bigger camera setups. For me personally, this was an exciting update because I was literally shopping for a Ronin 2 or a Mobi Pro, but just couldn't swallow the price and cumbersome size. And while searching for a solution, DJI reached out to me to let me know that they just built a larger system for me to test out. So perfect timing, DJI always ahead of the curve. This will definitely be my new setup for real estate or landscapes or cityscapes or shots from moving vehicles or just higher end commercials where I have more time for every setup. I probably wouldn't use this setup for quicker documentary run and gun scenarios like weddings or events, at least not as my A-cam, as I'd get worn out too fast with how heavy it is. But it's exciting for me to now be able to use nicer cinema images in more scenarios due to the ever-increasing gimbal technology developments. Now, how much does it cost? As of the filming of this video, I have no idea. They didn't give me the final pricing, so I'm just gonna put that on the screen of everything and how much it costs. I imagine the Ronins will be similar to past models and pricing. So there you have my thoughts and review. Hopefully this was helpful in helping you decide whether any of these products are right for you. Links below to buy any of them. And if you want want to see a video that we shot on the RS3 Pro showing off how this system works in a real shooting scenario, make sure to check out this video shot on our channel by Landon doing a fun little short film. And to learn more about how to shoot professional video content and how to actually make money with video and land more or higher paying clients, make sure to check out our Ultimate Online School Full-Time Filmmaker. And we actually just launched a brand new starter course for only $27, so you can pick that up in the link in the description to immediately start seeing improvements in your video quality. But that's it. Don't forget to subscribe to see more product releases just like this. And if you have any further questions, please let me know.